question is, where is this gravesite?
Oh yes, Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge. Well, actually, he is buried with his wife in Forest Hill Cemetery, so they were parted in death, and, you know, convention reigned.
Further questions? Gwen?
Did you start hearing from a lot of the descendants once?
No.
No? Nobody else?
Basically, no. I thought that I would hear from enraged Hale descendants, but I haven't. Maybe they're too angry to.
Was it a big family?
All I know is that recently there was a piece about Hale as photographer and scientist in Harvard Magazine, which stopped short of the beginning of this relationship, and I almost felt that it was somebody who was trying to, you know, tell another story.
Spin.
And not get into that. But probably the closest I've come is Freeman descendants. Two of the great nieces, great nieces, I suppose, looked in their family archives and found the only photos really that I could find at that point. The young photo with her cousin, and the photo of her with the silver birch trees in Intervale. Very sad for me, because I was told by Smith College, where a lot of the Hale and Freeman papers are, that Harriet McClintock, who was a niece, great niece, I think, was still alive at 96, and that maybe she would be able to tell me more about Harriet Freeman, who she obviously must have known well. Well, she died 2 months before my letter got there, and her daughter got in touch with me and said, oh, she would have been so thrilled to hear from you. She was the family historian.
Another
So
question?
they were aware of her conservation efforts. I mean, the few descendants that you talked to, were they aware of her illustrious?
No. In fact, this latest man who's got in touch with me, he's been dipping into the book because he doesn't have time to really read it until he finishes his novel. But he just is amazed that he'd never heard these things about her.
Maybe to Mike Sherry. We were sitting having dinner today, sorry for this, and I said, 1910, what happened between 1910 and we started looking at the origins of the Trust for Public Lands? 1972, right after Earth Day. And so what was happening, does anyone here tonight, this is a scholarly group, what happened, in the conservation movement? Was it all at the state level, or local level that got into land trusts kind of flourished in 1980 or so and the like, Trust for Public Lands, 72. Anyone have a sense?
Well, yes, FDR, of course, was behind a lot of the later national parks.
Can you imagine the amount of research she has done just for tonight? I mean, just that whole dimension of both Freeman and Hale and what it took to kind of put that together.
Well, I told Ken that I'd been commissioned to write an article about them as conservationists, pioneering conservationists, for Appalachia magazine, so he immediately saw a connection. You know Ken.
Couldn't say no.
How does Hale rate in terms of environmentalists, in terms of that period around maybe New England or maybe the U.S.?
Well, this all happened.
Want to repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, how does Hale rate among other preservationists and conservationists in New England at that time in the early 20th century?
Well, this all happened very much towards the end of his life. I mean, she brought his attention to it and suggested that he call a meeting in 1902. He went to Washington at the end of 1903, was there till just before he died in 1909. The people who were really involved, the American forest people and so on, obviously valued him highly because he had such a huge reputation for many other things, international arbitration and education of African Americans and any number of things, that they were extremely pleased to have somebody of such celebrity speaking for their cause. But I wouldn't say that he was known more than that. He gave some very rousing speeches at the congresses, and he wrote a lot for Forest and Irrigation and in his own publication. But at American Forest, they they didn't seem to know anything about this when I went and I spent a whole day looking through issues during those years of forest and irrigation. Did you have a question? Or you weren't telling me to shut up?
Well, people, husbands, you know, Sarah's books, $25 for the soft cover.
Oh yes, no,
$30 for the hard, or in the red parlor over there for those who would like to buy, which doesn't include that much on conservation. That came later for this speech
well,
tonight.
actually, no, there is a chapter on
Oh, sorry.
conservation and preservation.
I'm helpless. Well, let's.
Stephen wants to tell you one other thing.
Okay,
that
Stephen.
he was amazed about, that he discovered about Edward Everett Hale.
The husband of Sarah.
Yeah.
Turn around a little bit.
Stand up.
So I've been living with this for rather a long time. In fact, my eyes have often been seen to going right up my head. So this was about, I guess about 4 years ago, something like that, well into it. And I was in Hawaii, and we had a major space conference, outer space. And we had some bigwigs from NASA, very senior people, talking about the space station, its origins and so forth. We've got 6 people up there at the moment. So this director starts talking about it, and he's got a PowerPoint presentation, which is the only way that NASA can communicate. And
Mind you, that's the way I communicate.
I want to tell you, the real origin of the space station, the way this idea actually was formulated, was a certain Edward Everett Hale in 1867, who came up, who wrote a book called The Brick Moon, and he came up with this concept. And my eyes were rolling.
You can't escape.
I just said, I don't believe this. So I stood up and I stopped the meeting dead in its tracks. I was the chairman of this thing, so I could do that. But I said, you're not going to believe this. But he actually came up with that concept, and so NASA celebrates him as a major pioneer in the sort of league of Jules Verne and so forth, which was about the same time. Absolutely remarkable wide aperture that this individual had.
Yes,
Conservations, outer space,
and international arbitration.
Right.
He was one of the first people to speak
Really
for
amazing.
the need to have an international court, which became the Court at The Hague.
No.
Again and again you can find, you really came upon something.
Well, here
all
he's
those years
summered
ago.
in Matunic, Rhode Island. Let's celebrate Sarah. Terrific. I guess there's Deb. There's some lemonades or something. Deb, lemonade in the dining room.
Yes, lemonade in the dining room.
And book sales over here. And thank you all for coming, and drive safely.